Hello, everybody. Dave Neal here, stand-up comic host of Bachelor Nation News. And after Tuesday's Fantasy Suite episode with Clayton Echard, we're left with lots of questions. Most of us are not experts and can't handle those questions, but we're bringing in an expert today, Dr. Diane Strachowski. Hello, Dr. Diane. How are you?
Hey, Dave. Good. I'm still reeling from last night, but I'm good.
Yeah. Now, how does it feel seeing everyone in the nation give their armchair expert advice? Like, how does it feel being an actual expert when you see people throwing out gaslighting and blame shifting and all these other terms?
Well, so many people have been appreciative of my posts where I just kind of break it down because people watch it and can be triggered like, oh shit, this reminds me of my crazy ex. What do I make of this? So I feel like it's an important message to help people understand what to do and what not to do in dating and in your own relationships.
Yeah, I think that's what's really great about the show is that we watch it and then we go, "Oh, that was rough. Why did he act that way? Why did she act that way?" So what is it telling to us when we feel triggered by something? Does that mean we need to act on it, or is it just, we're watching something that's disgusting to us?
Well, here's the thing. I think it's a common reaction. And I, was commenting on Katie and Greg's episode. And oftentimes we're looking at it through our own lens. And if we have been in an experience with a person who has come at us, we're going to have our own triggers, our own reactions. But I think the majority of people will all agree in this circumstance of a lot of what not to do. And, people will, and we'll talk about it specifically, what Susie did, what Clayton did. But as a couples therapist, there's just no way I can put forward condoning. Like, that was a good dialogue. Like, that was a good conversation. We should learn from that. I mean, clearly there's a lot of what not to do.
Now, when it comes to gender roles, I guess it probably is easier for me to look at Clayton and understand where he's coming from versus my audience, 92% women, hear a strong man yelling at her, and then they take her side. So how do you even untangle everything that went down? And for everyone who's watching, we're assuming you already watched the Fantasy Suite. We're not going to give you the undergraduate conversations. This is straight to the specifics here, but how do you untangle it all when clearly he was hurt, but then he hurt her as well?
Well, I took some notes, Dave, and I think it would be helpful if we did just kind of go through like what happened. Okay. Because I think we have to have a setup here. So for me, I've been watching the entire season and I saw something flip. And it wasn't just yesterday. He flipped after hometowns when Clayton said, I've been holding back for too long, right? And he tells Jesse that conversation, I'm not going to hold back anymore. And I think that's an important context because who told Clayton to hold back? I see him from my lens as an anxious attachment style person who's what I call low expressive. He doesn't have great communication skills. He himself has chosen to kind of hold back. But the setup for all of this, and he says it multiple times, if I don't share with them how I feel about them, meaning I love them, they're all going to leave. We've never heard that before.
So do you think that he was just getting bad coaching? Do you think that this was something that the producers were kind of saying, hey, hold back, hold back?
Yeah, I think, and quite honestly, I think the producers tried really hard to convince us, again, what a great guy Clayton was. I think they thought he was another Sean Lowe. I think they thought that he was going to be this big, burly, Midwestern, nice guy. And they had no idea about his lack of communication skills, his lack of relationship skills. There have been some big missing pieces for me. And I think even they were probably surprised about how the end unraveled, quite honestly.
Now, I actually still like Clayton. I see him as someone who was so, exposed to his greatest fear and I'm sure he wishes he could take it back. But also, like, I see a guy, and again, I just see a guy. I played football, not to his level. There, your whole life, you're training to just exert as much force as possible, and then now he's just this bull in a china shop trying to keep his
Yes.
emotions cool. When everything about him was like, be a man, get out there and go rip someone's head off. It seems to be like, like we want men to share their emotions, but also he probably should have taken a walk and worked out before he talked to her or something.
Oh, absolutely. And part of my post that I wrote on Instagram was, this is a man who's clearly dysregulated. And interesting enough, even in couples therapy, John Gottman, who does something called a love lab for couples, puts a plethysmograph on people's fingers and measures their heart rate. And when your heart rate is above 100 beats per minute, you should chill out. You just should not have that conversation. And granted, Susie was amped up too, right? And we can talk about Susie. She was, this was building for her, watching the other women go on the date, wondering what she was going to say. I mean, we saw her angsting. But let me put some things in perspective on Clayton too. And that is, who is he? Like, who is this man? So I look at things in a deeper level. Like, where did this man come from? Okay, the little we know about Clayton's family. Remember, he also gives us mixed messages about him. The first date, I don't know if you recall, with Susie, he tells her how happily married his parents are, right? That they've been married for 30 years. You get this picture of this nice package. Now he's on a date with Serene, and he's talking about his dad being a tough love kind of guy and his mother being softer, but that he didn't learn good communication skills. So he flip-flops a little bit, and the story can be both, that his parents are happily married, but he still didn't learn good communication skills. And we see that kind of crumbling because I just don't think he knows how to handle conflict. And truly, I think in the moment, Clayton is upset. He doesn't get what he wants, which is he wants to sleep with all three women.
Now, do you think he? I guess the question is how do you think he rationalized that being part of his decision making process? Because obviously, in hindsight, if he really wanted Susie, he should have avoided the others. But do you think? I mean, do you think he needed to test drive each of them, or do you think that was just like a perk he was trying to exploit?
I do. Here's the thing. I think Clayton got bad coaching. I think, and I said this in my post, that I think Jesse Palmer saying there are no rules here gave Clayton permission. I think he is like a little kid in a candy store that is getting all this validation. And when I talk about an anxiously attached person, they love it. It's like, "Oh, give me more. Tell me I'm great." Like you saw like his eyes light up when he's like, "Oh, you love me." Like, wow. It's like he hasn't had this happen to him before, right? Bigger context here. It feels like he's so excited, right? He's been enamored by Shanae, and even on the women tell all, he's still kind of like naive about that and surprised, like, what? I trusted you. I mean, there is a naivete here. So he thinks this is my journey, right? I get to do what I want, which is, and I am actually convinced he may not even have chosen Susie. He never says to Susie in that argument, "You were the one. I want to marry you." He says, "I love you the most,"
Mm.
right? But he's already just said, "I love you" to two other women. I think now suddenly he's most interested in Susie because she's the only one who says, "I'm not sure."
Oh, so you think that he's interested in the idea that she's now the hardest to get?
Yes. And that's what happens. I mean, this stuff is deep, and this is all just my supposition, but I've been doing this for a long time, Dave. And I look at this and I say, sounds like the dad who's a little bit emotionally unavailable to him. So what happens is we are more, that feels like love. Love to me feels like working hard to get your approval. So Susie withdraws, she backs up a little bit, and now suddenly I'm done. Well, he could have handled that 100 different ways, right? If she really was his top choice, what stopped him from saying, "Susie, oh my God, I screwed up. You know what? I'll do anything I can to make this up to you. I want to marry you. I'll tell the other women I made a mistake. What can I do?" He didn't go there. He was pissed. You don't want me. I don't want you.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I mean, in my own relationship, my fiance and I all the time we'll get in a fight and she'll push away, but it's like and in the moment I respect that, but it's like I know she's not pushing away from me,
Yes.
but she has this fight or flight thing that happens, and I saw
Yes.
that in Clayton, and I was actually surprised to see that. Although he did say to Susie, "I'll spend the next 7 hours talking to you about this." So I wonder about. I do wonder about the edit
Yeah.
we didn't get to see. Now,
Right.
clearly, there's always conversations about their edit. Who want,
Yeah.
there was some thoughts that maybe he accused her of wanting to be the next Bachelorette. Maybe, they would have, and they would never air that. Maybe the idea where in normal relationships you can have the benefit of the doubt that you're pursuing love. Here you have to say maybe she just wasn't that into him. Is that an option as well, or do you think that's
Yeah.
not?
I think it's really fair. We do have to talk about Susie and what's happening for her. I mean, there is a big buildup here, right? She comes from hometowns. Now, granted, and we know who Susie is. Look at her own family. She comes from a secure functioning family. I really liked her family. Her dad loves her, says she's that kind of person. She's really loyal, trustworthy. I like Susie for sure. But she has no idea where she stands, right? All the girls say, I have no idea kind of where I stand. They're all confused. So then she comes in, right? She's had this big buildup, a little bit different than like Maddie Pruitt, who had this idea about sexuality and she was a virgin. I think we can't compare these because this feels different to me. But she does tell him, and I think she feels badly that these are my values. And he's like tripping over himself. And now he's telling her, not only do I love you, but I said this to these other women. So I'm not so sure that she knew exactly what she wanted to do, but now she's confronted with this information. She was already ambiguous about him. He says, I love you, but I love these other people too. I mean, what woman could feel good about that? Like, this is my fiance who's told two other women he loves them.
Yeah, there's
I
a
mean, come
reason.
on.
Yeah, there's a reason that they try not to do that. And I always
Yeah.
wonder, are the Bachelor producers? They've had several seasons of slipping ratings where they just like we need to create destruction here. Michelle Young had this happy story. It's like blah, boring. We need somebody
Yeah.
who can be either manipulated or I don't know. I don't know. Well, look at it this way. We talk about Susie having the third fantasy suite date where she had room to kind of question
Yes.
herself and ruminate. And separately, Clayton was rejected from night one by more people, I think, than have ever rejected him.
Three
We
people.
we saw
Mhm.
we saw two of them, right? And then the third one they didn't even
Yes.
show. She just was
That's
gone.
right.
Yeah,
That's
and
right.
then you wonder, does he have this imposter syndrome? Like maybe they're not even here for me. And is that the self-fulfilling prophecy when Susie gives him the ultimatum too late? Is
Well,
that what he's?
here's the other thing. Let's talk about production because I did a post on this too about creative editing and what they cherry pick and what they put in and what they don't. And they probably went to all the women and they knew for sure that Susie was the one who was going to have issue with this. And they put her third intentionally, right, to create drama. But the point is, when was Susie going to bring this up? Now, what Maddie Pruitt did with Peter, if you remember, is after hometowns, I think it was during the rose ceremony, she said, wait, Peter, we need to talk. Right. And I don't think Susie, obviously, she didn't do that because there was no other time for her to express this. So even if she were to tell him sooner, when was that going to happen on hometowns?
Well, that's a good question, and I
Right.
think I think the answer is yes. Like I think it's almost like, are you willing to not be pushed so hard by production? And if production says, "All right, Susie, wait over here," and she goes, "No, I need to go talk to him now," you have the moment where you kind of break through, and maybe Madison did that, where she was like, "No, I'm going to break through and have this
Yeah.
conversation." But
Well,
it is interesting to think that maybe production is really trying to sequester them from those private conversations once the going's starting to get kind of serious.
and I mean, in a perfect world, I had a moment of feeling bad for Clayton because you could see that he felt trapped.
Mm,
He felt like it was a no-win conversation because it had already happened.
right.
He had already slept with the other 2 women, and he wished he had had this information. But this is why I'm still not 100% convinced that she was his final person because of all the things he could have said. He could have, again, said, "You're my number 1. I will spend my lifetime making this up to you." But he didn't.
Now, do you think it's possible that in that moment where she says, "Oh no, no, I can't go forward," where he goes, "All right, how do I save face and potentially salvage, silver and bronze?"
Yeah, I don't know because in the end, we still don't know what that ending is. And I feel like there's obviously production has a hand in this. Lots of people have said, comments to me, why is Susie lingering? Why didn't she just get up and get the heck out of there? Kind of like the same with Ari and Becca in that painful breakup. She looks like she's trying to leave, right? I mean, she looks like she's trying to leave and they keep pulling her back and they have round 2, which she's got her jacket on, but I think this is where his ego gets involved, and there's just no other way to say that this is an angry response. And to me, you know, do we want to call it gaslighting? Here's the thing. Gaslighting, just to be clear on the terminology, Dave, is I make you think that you're going crazy. What gaslighting would have been here is if he said to Susie, "No, you didn't say that."
Right.
He didn't say that directly, and other people said, "Well, Susie gaslighted him." Neither one of them gaslit each other. They were both just angry.
Yeah.
They were both amped up, and in couples therapy, the first rule is calm down first before you carry on.
Yeah.
Neither one of them was calm. There was no adult in the room, and I do feel like even Jesse, to be honest with you, if I hold him up and responsible because the women tell all got chaotic, there was no leader there. It was the same thing in Bachelor in Paradise where we didn't have a consistent host. I felt that Clayton needed more direction. He should have been told. I said this in my video. At the last time, he could have said, "Whoa, Clayton, I hear where you're going, man, and you feel like you need to give the women more validation, but they are here for you. Don't tell them. Make the one woman feel special." I mean, the point is why the ratings are the way they are, that not many couples actually make it to the end, is because of that very reason that most women don't feel special.
Yeah. It's interesting because the Bachelorette does have a higher success rate, so it
Yeah.
makes you wonder
Yes.
if that there's just a different sort of thing happening there with the Bachelorette leads with their communication skills or how they make the men feel. Now,
That's right.
when it comes to how Clayton responded, now obviously we
Yeah.
saw him initially say, "Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way," and then he got
Yeah.
anger. You could kind of see his blood start boiling.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your advice when it comes to a couple? Like, isn't he allowed to share his feelings? Was he actually yelling? He did apologize for raising his voice, but to me, I come from a loud family, so for me, I was like, "Oh, that's not yelling." But a lot of people said it was. Is it? So
Well,
what was unhealthy there?
so so look at Susie's family. Do you imagine her dad yelling at her like that? Seemed like a very mild-mannered kind of person. So I agree with you, Dave. If you come from a yelling family, you may not hear it that way.
Right.
But remember too, back to from a woman's perspective, she's this petite thing, he's this large man. She's out of her element too. She's just saying, and you could see her own confusion, like, "I know I should have would have told him earlier, and I feel bad too, but now I'm shocked." I think she's really shocked, right? You love me, and now it's over? Like, what? And now you're coming at me, blaming me. I think she really thought that maybe she could just kind of slip away. She said that herself, like, this could have been handled differently. But I call it fawning response. And this is something important for your listeners to know. So, in trauma, there are 4 autonomic responses, Dave. There's fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. When you feel fear, and that's what I think she actually felt, fear, because a big man is raising his voice at you. And if you're not a woman, you don't experience that same fear. That she fawns over him. She's apologizing. She's saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And people are like, why is she Why is she over apologizing?
De-escalating?
She's scared. And fawning is a natural response. You say whatever you need to say to the person who's coming at you to protect yourself. It's a
Mm,
natural autonomic response. That's what fawning is. Same thing that a woman, if she's being attacked, she might freeze. And then later she's like, well, why didn't I respond? Why didn't I fight back? Because your body is telling you that that's what you should do to keep you safe.
right.
It's autonomic, meaning you're not really thinking that through.
You're
But
surviving.
she's surviving, and Susie is in shock.
Yeah, no,
She's in shock, and she's merely trying to protect herself from this big guy
that's a
who basically has all the power, right? He has the power.
it's a really great way that the way you phrase that, because so many people, with other instances we talk about on the show with sexual assault or whatever, why didn't you do something, why didn't you say something? Well, everyone's
Exactly.
just trying to survive. You might not,
That's
you
right.
might bury it or get it could be that Susie's watching it back and now she's feeling anger that she didn't feel before, because she's like, you know what, yeah, F that guy.
That's right. That's right, and she already said, I've had some negative relationships before too," right? I mean, here's the thing, Clayton didn't like it, she didn't like it, um, he could have just handled it so many different ways. He could have, I think at one point he did say, "Let's just talk about it more." Could Susie had granted him that time? I think she needed to calm down. I think again, she was in shock. But for me, I look at the relationship and I look at the possibility of longevity here. And I really think, forget the sex piece because that happens in the fantasy suite. People are like, well, doesn't she know what show she's on? It's more the expression of love to three people.
Yeah,
I just think, Ben Higgins even said, don't do it. Right. I mean, in the end, Ben got engaged and then it didn't work out. You
right.
can't tell me that as a fiance, that doesn't haunt you. It's
Yeah.
here for everyone to hear. And no one wants to be your second or your third choice or to think he's having sex with all three of us, deciding which one is the better partner based upon that.
Yeah, I mean, this
That's
is
how
what
it feels.
this is why the show's been around for so long, right? Because even after 26 seasons or whatever, we're still finding new sort of things that are coming out. There's new variables, and with social media, I've seen the show in my eyes look like it holds the leads to a higher level than it used to, and. I look at it. The place I look at it though with Clayton is like he never made it to fantasy suites on Michelle's
Yes.
season.
No, that's
So like
right.
someone
That's right.
like Nick Vile, he
Yeah.
got to see what it was like to be on that side, and then when it was his turn, only had sex with his final choice. So it's almost like blissful ignorance. But it's definitely a very unique situation that he caught himself in, and I guess the
For
question.
sure.
And now the question I have is like, the show obviously kind of sleep deprives them and keeps them very busy and keeps them from their social media. When it actually comes to resolving these sorts of issues, do you think that his response was made worse because of all the other pressures put on him as the show's leading up to the big finale? He's a day away from picking out rings. Like, what's going on his back that could have led this to be that explosion?
Well, here's the thing that I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around, and I say this also because of how he responded at the women tell all. There's something that just doesn't square for me, and it does feel again a little bit ego driven, egocentric, that he's literally like, well, this is my journey and I'm not perfect, forgive me, right?
Right.
And I that's where I have a really hard time because he's trying to be empathic, right? Like he also came forward with Elizabeth and made an apology about the ADHD, though that never got aired, which to me was a huge miss. He still kind of doubles down and sort of while he is getting attacked by all the women, he's still sort of seeing it as this was a dream. I'm like, Clayton, this is a nightmare at this point. This isn't a dream. Like there's something that didn't quite fit for me, even after he's watching it and saying the hardest part was watching it back, the hardest part is you hurt a lot of women, Clayton.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's something about the lack of insight here that he needs to be able to see these things. He really, does need to do some work on himself, some therapy to get some exposure about what is a healthy couple, what is a healthy relationship, how do you protect the people that you love?
Yeah. And the question I have, without giving away any spoilers, because I don't truly know how it ends. I think we
Yeah.
might find out in the last few minutes on Tuesday night. But will the season ever end? But do you think, and how does someone go about mending such horrible fights like this? Can someone like Clayton raise his voice and go into Hulk mode and say things he regrets and talk his way out of it?
Here's the thing, okay? Is it comes to dating and relationships, Dave, if my husband and I have a fight, right? But we've been married for 12 years, I'm going to be pretty forgiving of it, right? Like cuz I have a context, but when you're dating early on and you don't have that foundation built and someone raises their voice, I also said if he's doing that on national TV that early,
Yeah.
wow. You got to kind of wonder how I call it frustration tolerance, which is you denied me something and I'm frustrated.
Yeah. Well,
How do I handle that?
I don't have any answers here, but I do see all the women from Women Tell All yelling at Clayton. I think in part because they can't criticize producers. They can't criticize the
Yes,
show.
yes,
Clayton's the
yes.
only person that they can criticize. And if I were Clayton, I would say, hey, look, I know I yelled at you. I'm really yelling at the producers because they put us in a situation that we
Yeah,
could have completely avoided. And
yeah.
obviously, they're never going to air that. That would be my way to try to resolve it with Susie there. But it's like, so someone brought up the idea of scapegoating. It's a type of term you hear all the time, but I
Mhm.
didn't know too much about it. But I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the idea that like Clayton could become the scapegoat to all of the women's problems with all of the villain edits and all of the shaming that they were doing with each other. Is it easy to pile on the lead because they are the privileged person in the situation?
I agree. I mean, I think quite honestly, I think it's a horrible position for men to be in. I think any man who is on The Bachelor does need, back to your point, like he didn't make it to fantasy suites. I really thought this is a man who's just doesn't have enough experience to really know what he's agreed to, right?
Mm,
So I felt bad for him in that moment, but I still do think of, regardless of the producers and the edits, his true behavior came out when he didn't get what he wanted and he put blame on someone else. He could have doubled down, he could have talked about his apologies, he could have talked about wanting to save her, doing whatever he could to fix it, and we don't hear that. Instead, we hear him kind of throwing up his hands. This was my journey, and I'm human, and I screwed up. And so a lot of people, you can choose your sides, but I just say, in the end, would you want that for a relationship for yourself?
right.
It's one thing to like people. A lot of people do that. We like people who are vulnerable on the show, but you do have to take into consideration their background, their history, how good a fit for you are together. And sure, if Clayton and Susie were in an established relationship and they had that fight about something else, there would be more foundational work. But so early on, you're looking for reasons to exclude somebody,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. And there's also this added pressure that Susie will have to not take him back. We saw with Rachel
Yes.
Kirkconnell and Matt James, there was this outside pressure in their situation based off of race, that it was like, how dare you take this person back? And Susie is going to would disappoint a lot of people for taking him back. But I guess one of my last questions is, at what point is it too late for Clayton to apologize? Because it looks like he's come to the fact that he's made big mistakes, but he never got there with Susie in the moment. So sometimes people just take longer to realize they've made a mistake, right? Is it? I mean, obviously that doesn't say that doesn't give him the right to save his relationship. But I guess my question is, how big of a buffer do we have for when we can accept someone with grace?
Well, here's the thing, and I think we might have talked about this before, Dave, because we've spoken before, but there are two kinds of people. There's helicopters and there's submarines. Helicopters are handle things fast. I'm a helicopter. I process things. I can get angry, but I can also repair quickly. And then I move on. And my husband's like, oh, there you are. But submarines are slow. Like they get slow to get anger and then they come up slowly. Everybody's window of tolerance, as we call it, is kind of different. But I think that Clayton owes all the women an apology. I think we're forgetting that there's Gabby here and Rachel,
Right,
who were robbed of their love journey too. There's only going to be one bachelorette, right? They all got robbed of this story because here was this guy, again, a guy who needed a lot of validation, who was anxious, indecisive, but then he forgot that he's on a journey with people who have feelings and reactions, and there are consequences to people's behaviors. And it just wasn't a mature person thinking about the bigger picture. If you really want a family, if you really want children, what are they going to say about you looking back at this on national TV?
yeah. Well, the producers got what they asked for. That's for sure.
The most dramatic season ever at all of our expenses.
Right.
Right? It's like, oh my God, am I drinking wine, coffee? I don't know.
Well, there's no more saying that this was a boring season. That's for sure. Now we gotta let you go, but we got your Instagram, Back to Love Doc, and are you also on YouTube now?
I am on YouTube. I actually have my own station called Rose Therapy, where I go a little deeper into the rose. And I'll be talking about this. I haven't done it just yet. And my website. Also, I have a love style quiz. If you text the word love to 33777, find out who you are. Are you an anxiously attached person? Because the majority of people who are go on the show. Figure out who you are, because if you can actually relate to one or the other, what does that say about you?
Yeah,
right?
It's good to know your blueprints so you can properly warn your partner. You know, when you talk about helicopter and submarine, I feel like my fiance Tasha, she's a helicopter with when she gets angry, and then a submarine when she forgives me. So I feel like she's got a little bit of both there.
Quick to anger, slow to forgiveness.
Yeah,
right?
that's the plight. That's it. That's what flowers are for, though, right?
That's exactly right, Dave. And as I say, we're all on a journey to find love. But let's be kind to each other. And I'm also very careful about my words. This isn't whether I like somebody or not. I'm just really commenting on what behaviors are good and what can be improved. And I do appreciate that they're in real time stress, as you say, the environment, the background. And the producers really need to be careful about this. They could have chosen not to air this too.
Right.
They could have.
Right. Yeah. And then they made it. They definitely made it interesting, and it's not over yet. I'm going to be doing a East Coast and West Coast live stream after the finale. If you want to Skype in, by all means, I'd love to hear what you think once it's all said and done, because there's more info to come out.
I'm on the West Coast. I'd love to, Dave. Send me the link and we'll join in. I want to see how this unfolds, because part of me just wants to protect all these women. And I hope Clayton gets some good coaching after the fact. I really do.
Me too. Well, thanks again, everyone. Dr. Diane Strachowski. We always appreciate you. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think, and we will talk to you all in a little bit. There's a link below. You can go follow Dr. Diane Strachowski's Instagram and YouTube channels. We'll see you guys later. Bye, everybody.